The year is 1835. The place, a secluded valley deep within the Rocky Mountains, a place where the wind whispers secrets through the pines and the only law is the unforgiving rhythm of nature. Here, a young trapper named Finn, barely 20 years old, is learning the harsh realities of survival from his mentor, a grizzled mountain man known only as Bear. Finn, fresh from the settlements, still carries the scent of civilization, a faint whiff of fear and inexperience that the mountains are slowly but surely stripping away. Written by Manus A.I. They are camped by a roaring fire, the flames licking at the cold night air, casting dancing shadows on the rough-hewn walls of their temporary shelter. Bear, his face a roadmap of sun-weathered lines and old scars, is meticulously working a piece of thick buffalo hide. His movements are deliberate, practiced, each stroke of his knife a testament to decades spent in this unforgiving wilderness. Finn watches, fascinated, as Bear carefully shaves away the last vestiges of hair and flesh, preparing the hide for a transformation that will turn it into something more than mere leather. It will become a shield, a second skin, a silent guardian against the myriad dangers of the mountains. Finn had met Bear 6 months earlier at the Rendezvous, the annual gathering where trappers, traders, and Native Americans came together to exchange furs, supplies, and stories. Finn had arrived from St. Louis with a head full of romantic notions about the mountain life, inspired by the tales of Jim Bridger and Jedediah Smith. He had imagined himself as a lone wolf, a rugged individualist conquering the wilderness. But within his first week in the mountains, he had nearly died 3 times. Once from drinking bad water, once from stumbling into a grizzly's den, and once from simply getting lost in a blizzard. It was Bear who found him, half frozen and delirious, and dragged him back to camp. Bear didn't lecture him, didn't mock his ignorance. He simply fed him, warmed him, and then the next morning handed him a knife and said, "You want to live here, boy? Then you learn." Since then, Finn has been Bear's shadow, learning the 1,000 skills that separate the living from the dead in this land. He has learned to read animal tracks, to set traps in icy streams, to find water in the driest valleys, and to navigate by the stars. But today's lesson is different. Today, Bear is teaching him something that goes beyond mere survival. He is teaching him the art of protection, the ancient craft of transforming raw hide into armor that can stop a blade. Part 1. The Raw Material. For the mountain men, every animal taken was a gift, its flesh providing sustenance, its fur providing warmth, and its hide providing protection. But not all hides were created equal. Buffalo, elk, and moose hides were prized for their thickness and durability, far superior to the thinner deer or beaver pelts. These larger hides were destined for more than just clothing. They were the raw material for a form of armor, a testament to the ingenuity born of necessity. The process began with careful preparation. After skinning, the hide was stretched taut on a frame made of sturdy pine branches lashed together with rawhide strips, flesh side up. Bear showed Finn how to meticulously scrape away every last bit of flesh, fat, and membrane, using a specialized tool he called a fleshing beam and a 2-handled scraper. "Meat left on hide is like a lie you tell yourself," Bear grunted, his voice raspy from years of shouting over rapids and howling winds. "Sooner or later, it comes back to bite you. Flies, maggots, rot. Whole thing ruined." He held up a small piece of translucent membrane between his thick fingers. "See this? That's the line between leather and garbage. You cross it, you got nothing. Too gentle, you're a coward. Too rough, you're a fool. The hide'll tell you where that line is if you listen." This was hard, back-breaking work, often taking hours, sometimes days, depending on the size of the hide. Finn's arms ached after just an hour, his hands blistered and raw, bleeding in places where the scraper's handle had rubbed the skin away. He watched Bear work with effortless efficiency, his movements fluid and precise, the scraper moving in long, even strokes. When Finn tried, he pressed too hard, gouging the hide in places, or too soft, leaving patches of stubborn fat. A thought crept into Finn's mind, unbidden and unwelcome. Back in St. Louis, he would be sitting in a warm tavern right now, drinking ale, listening to a fiddle player, maybe talking to a girl with clean hands and a pretty smile. His hands wouldn't be bleeding. His back wouldn't feel like it was breaking. He wouldn't smell like death and buffalo brains. What the hell was he doing out here, scraping a dead animal's hide in the middle of nowhere, learning skills that no civilized person would ever need? Bear glanced at him as if reading his thought. "You thinking about quitting?" he asked, not unkindly. Finn hesitated, then shook his head. "No, just wondering if I'm cut out for this." "Nobody's cut out for this," Bear said, reaching over to guide Finn's hands, to show him the right angle, the right pressure. "You make yourself fit, or you die. That's the only choice the mountains give you." He paused, then added, "You're learning. It takes time. I've been doing this for 30 years, and I'm still learning." The goal was to expose the pure dermis, the fibrous layer that would eventually become leather. This layer, composed of tightly woven collagen fibers, was the source of leather's strength and durability. Once the flesh was removed, the hide was flipped over, and the hair was scraped away from the grain side. This required a different tool, a sharper scraper, and even more care. Damage to the grain layer would weaken the final product, making it susceptible to tearing. Next came the dehairing. For some hides, this involved soaking them in a solution of wood ash and water, a primitive lye that would loosen the hair follicles. For others, especially in colder weather, the hide would be left to freeze and thaw repeatedly, a process that also helped to loosen the hair. Once loosened, the hair was scraped away with a dull knife or a specialized scraping tool, leaving a smooth, clean surface. This was followed by a thorough rinsing, often in a cold mountain stream, to remove any remaining lye or impurities. Part 2. The Brain Tan. The next morning, as Finn was hauling water from the stream, he heard Bear's low whistle, a warning. 3 Shoshone riders emerged from the tree line, moving silently through the snow. Finn's hand went instinctively to his knife, but Bear shook his head sharply. "Easy. These are friends." The lead rider, an older man with gray braids and a face like carved stone, dismounted and approached. He and Bear clasped forearms, spoke briefly in Shoshone. Finn caught only fragments, but he understood the tone. Respect. Old friendship. The man's eyes swept over the camp, lingered on the stretched buffalo hide, then on Finn. He said something that made Bear laugh, a rare sound. "He says you look like a lost puppy," Bear translated. "I told him you're learning. He says we'll see." The Shoshone stayed for an hour, sharing dried meat and news. A Blackfoot war party had been spotted 2 valleys over. Trappers had been killed near the Yellowstone. The mountains were restless this winter. When they left, Bear watched them disappear into the trees, his expression unreadable. "You see how they moved?" he asked Finn. "Like smoke, like they're part of the land. That's what you need to become. Not a visitor, not a conqueror. Part of it." Now came the crucial step, a technique learned from those same tribes who had perfected it over centuries. Brain tanning. "Every animal has enough brains to tan its own hide," Bear explained, holding up a small, pulpy mass from the buffalo they had killed 3 days earlier. "It's a gift from the Creator, a perfect balance. Running elk taught me this. That old man you just saw, that was his nephew, Red Hawk. The knowledge passes down, generation to generation. Now I'm passing it to you. This," he gestured to the brains, "is the heart of it all." The brains were mashed into a paste and mixed with warm water to create a creamy emulsion. Bear showed Finn how to work this mixture into the hide, starting from the center and working outward in circular motions. "You're not just rubbing grease into dead skin," Bear said. "You're waking it up. Every fiber needs to drink. Miss a spot, and that spot'll crack when you need it most. Like a man who doesn't drink enough water, the hide'll break under pressure." This was a labor-intensive process, requiring hours of kneading, stretching, and rubbing to ensure the brain matter penetrated every fiber of the leather. Finn, initially repulsed by the gruesome task, the slimy texture, and the pungent smell, soon understood its necessity. He watched as the hide, which had been stiff and board-like, gradually became supple and pliable under Bear's expert hands. The brains softened the hide, making it durable, yet flexible, a stark contrast to the stiff, rawhide-like material it had been. Bear told him a story as they worked. "I once knew a trapper, name of Coulter, who tried to skip this step. Thought he could just dry the hide and call it good, made himself a shirt out of it. First time it rained, that shirt turned hard as iron. Couldn't move his arms, couldn't breathe properly. Nearly got himself killed by a Crow war party because he couldn't draw his rifle fast enough. After that, he learned, you don't skip steps in the mountains, boy. Every step has a reason, and that reason is usually survival." After the braining, the hide was thoroughly rinsed again and then stretched and worked until it was completely dry and soft. This working, often involving pulling the hide over a taut rope or rubbing it against a smooth log, broke down the fibers, giving the buckskin its characteristic supple texture. But for the protective leather, an additional step was often taken: smoking. The hide would be hung over a smoldering fire, often in a makeshift tent, allowing the smoke to penetrate its fibers. This smoking process not only gave the buckskin a distinctive golden brown color, but also made it more water-resistant and prevented it from stiffening when wet, a crucial property for clothing and protective gear in the damp mountain environment. Part 3. Cuir Bouilli, the hardening process. While brain-tanned buckskin was soft and flexible, ideal for clothing, the mountain men also needed something harder, something that could deflect a knife thrust or a glancing blow from an arrow. This is where the ancient art of cuir bouilli, or boiled leather, came into play. Though the term was French and its origins lay in medieval Europe, the principles were rediscovered and adapted by the frontiersmen out of sheer necessity. It was not actual boiling, but a controlled heating process that transformed pliable leather into a rigid, almost horn-like material. Bear took a piece of the brain-tanned buffalo hide, already soft and supple, and submerged it in a large iron pot filled with water. He had built the fire carefully, adjusting the logs to maintain a steady, controlled heat. He dipped his finger into the water, held it there for a moment, then nodded. "How do you know when it's ready?" Finn asked. "You don't," Bear said. "Not at first. You burn a dozen hides, waste a dozen animals, before you learn. You want a shortcut? There isn't one. You want a thermometer? Don't have one. You learn to feel it, or you learn to fail." Finn bristled slightly. "I'm just asking, and I'm just answering." Bear's tone wasn't harsh, but it wasn't gentle either. "You see bubbles forming at the bottom, but not breaking the surface? That's close. But close isn't good. Enough. Too hot. You cook it. Makes it brittle as old bone. Too cold. Nothing happens. You're looking for the moment when the leather wants to change. It'll tell you, if you're paying attention." The water had been infused with oak bark tannins and a pinch of salt. "Bark makes it stronger," Bear said. "Salt draws out the last of the rot. Indians taught me that. Everything I know worth knowing, they taught me." Bear used a long stick to keep the hide submerged, watching it carefully. After about 60 seconds, he saw the edges begin to curl slightly, a sign that the leather was reaching the right state. "Now," he said, and quickly pulled the hide from the water using 2 sticks, his calloused hands still careful to avoid the scalding heat. Steam rose from the leather, and Finn could see it glistening, almost translucent. This was the critical moment. While still hot and soft, the leather could be molded into specific shapes. Bear had prepared a simple wooden form, a curved piece of log that roughly matched the contour of a human chest. He quickly draped the hot leather over the form, pressing it down firmly, smoothing out any wrinkles or air pockets. "You have maybe 2-3 minutes before it starts to cool and stiffen," he said, working quickly. "You need to know exactly what shape you want before you start. No time for thinking once it comes out of the water." Finn watched, mesmerized, as the leather began to cool and harden, taking on the shape of the form. Bear held it in place, occasionally adjusting the edges, until the leather was cool enough to hold its shape on its own. When he finally removed it from the form, it was rigid, almost like wood, but still retained a slight flexibility. "See?" Bear said, tapping it with his knuckles. It made a hard, hollow sound. "This will stop a knife. Maybe not a rifle ball, but a knife, an arrow, a tomahawk, absolutely." He handed Finn a smaller piece of brain-tanned hide and a pot of heated water. "Your turn," he said. "Try to make a wrist guard. Simple shape, good for learning." Finn, nervous but eager, submerged the leather. He watched it carefully, trying to judge the right moment. But he waited too long. When he finally pulled it out, the edges had begun to darken and curl excessively. "Too long," Bear said, shaking his head. "See how it's starting to brown? That's the beginning of burning. It'll be brittle now, crack under pressure. Try again." Finn tried again, this time pulling the leather out too soon. It was still stiff and board-like, not pliable enough to shape. "Not long enough," Bear said. "You need to feel it, boy. Watch the water, watch the leather. It'll tell you when it's ready." On the 3rd try, Finn got it right. The leather came out soft and pliable, and he quickly shaped it around a piece of wood that Bear had prepared. As it cooled, it hardened into a perfect wrist guard. Bear examined it, nodded approvingly. "Good. You're learning." Part 4. The Bulletproof Vest. The most common application for this hardened leather was the protective vest. Unlike the heavy, cumbersome plate armor of medieval knights, these vests were designed for mobility and practicality. They were typically made from several layers of Cuir Bouilli, often reinforced with additional layers of brain-tanned buckskin or even thin strips of rawhide. The layers were stitched together with strong sinew, creating a formidable barrier against common frontier threats. Bear showed Finn an old vest, scarred and worn, that had saved his life more than once. It was a remarkable piece of craftsmanship made from 3 layers of hardened buffalo hide, each layer slightly offset from the others to eliminate weak points. The layers were stitched together with thick sinew, the stitches small and tight, creating a nearly impenetrable barrier. The vest covered the chest, back, and sides, but left the arms free for movement. It was secured with leather straps and bone toggles, allowing for quick removal if needed. "This here," Bear said, tapping the thick leather over his chest, "stopped a Blackfoot arrow once, summer of '28, up near the Three Forks. We were ambushed, me and 2 other trappers. Arrow came out of nowhere, hit me square in the chest, knocked the wind out of me, felt like getting kicked by a mule, but it didn't penetrate, just left a bruise the size of my fist. Without this vest, I'd be buried up there with the others." He pointed to a deep gouge near his shoulder. And this was a Ute knife. Winter of '31. Hand-to-hand fight over a beaver trap. He tried to gut me, came in low and fast, but the knife just slid right off the hardened leather, barely scratched it. I was lucky. He wasn't. The vest was stiff, almost rigid, but still flexible enough to allow for movement, for drawing a rifle, or wielding a knife. Bear demonstrated, raising his arms, twisting his torso, showing Finn how the vest moved with his body. "You can't make it too stiff," he explained. "If you can't move, you can't fight, and if you can't fight, you're dead. It's a compromise, a balance between protection and mobility. You need to be able to run, to climb, to shoot, but you also need to survive a knife fight or an arrow ambush." He explained the construction process in detail. You start with the chest piece, the most important part. 3 layers minimum, 4 if you have enough hide. You shape each layer separately, making sure they fit together perfectly. Then you stitch them together using the strongest sinew you can find. I use buffalo sinew twisted into thread. It's stronger than any plant fiber, and it won't rot. You stitch in a crosshatch pattern, so if one stitch breaks, the others hold. Then you add the back piece the same way. Finally, you connect them with the side pieces and add the straps. Takes about a week to make a good vest, working steady. But it's worth it. This vest has saved my life 3 times that I know of, probably more that I don't. These vests were not truly bulletproof in the modern sense. A direct hit from a rifle ball would still penetrate. But they were incredibly effective against knife thrusts, arrowheads, and glancing blows from tomahawks. Finn was about to learn this firsthand. That night, as they slept by the dying fire, a pack of wolves, driven down from the high country by hunger, found their camp. Finn woke to the sound of growling, low and menacing, and saw yellow eyes reflecting the embers. Bear was already on his feet, rifle in hand, but there wasn't time to shoot. The alpha, a massive gray beast, lunged at Finn. Instinct took over. Finn rolled, felt the wolf's jaws snap shut on empty air, then felt the impact as the animal's claws raked across his chest. But instead of tearing through flesh, the claws scraped across the hardened leather vest Bear had made him wear. The sound was like nails on slate. The wolf, confused, hesitated for a split second. That was all Bear needed. The crack of his rifle split the night, and the alpha fell. The rest of the pack scattered into the darkness. Finn lay on his back, breathing hard, his heart hammering. Bear knelt beside him, checked the vest. 4 deep gouges in the leather, but the skin beneath was unbroken. "See?" Bear said quietly, "not just for show." He helped Finn to his feet. "You all right?" Finn nodded, still shaking. He looked down at the vest, at the marks that could have been his ribs torn open, his lungs punctured. "I thought I was dead," he said. "You would have been," Bear said. "Without that vest, you'd be wolf food. Now you understand. This isn't about history. It's not about tradition. It's about staying alive one more day." Finn sat by the fire for a long time after that, unable to sleep. He kept touching the gouges in the leather, feeling the depth of them, imagining what would have happened if he hadn't been wearing the vest. He thought about the hours he had spent scraping that buffalo hide, the ache in his arms, the blood on his hands. He thought about the brain tanning, the disgusting smell, the tedious work. He thought about the careful heating, the precise timing, the molding. Every step had seemed pointless at the time, just another skill he'd never use, another piece of frontier knowledge that had no place in the modern world. But it had saved his life. That vest, made from a dead animal, and his own bleeding hands had stood between him and death. And suddenly Finn understood something fundamental. This wasn't about rejecting civilization or embracing some romantic notion of wilderness living. This was about understanding that survival wasn't a given. It was earned, skill by skill, lesson by lesson, scar by scar. The mountains didn't care about his education, his dreams, his fears. They only cared about what he could do, what he knew, what he had made with his own hands. He looked at Bear, sleeping peacefully now, his rifle across his chest. The old man had given him more than skills. He had given him a chance to become something more than a lost boy from St. Louis. He had given him the tools to survive, and maybe, just maybe, to belong. Part 5. Beyond the Vest. Other applications. The hardened leather found numerous other applications. Knife sheaths that wouldn't cut through if you fell on them. Powder horn cases that kept gunpowder dry even underwater. Reinforced gauntlets for handling frozen beaver traps. Bear showed Finn each one, explained its purpose in terse sentences. Every piece was a solution to a problem, a lesson learned from someone's near-death experience or tragic loss. Bridger made himself a helmet once, Bear said, after a grizzly tore off half his scalp. Looked ridiculous, but it saved his life when another bear came at him years later. Claws just scraped off the hardened hide. Finn was beginning to see the pattern. These weren't decorations or traditions. They were personal shields, each one custom-made, each one imbued with the knowledge of its maker and the memory of those who hadn't been so lucky. Conclusion. As the sun dipped below the jagged peaks, Finn looked at the finished piece of hardened leather in his hands. He saw in it every hour of work, every mistake, every lesson. He saw the ingenuity born of necessity, the resourcefulness that transformed raw hide into armor. "This is what separates the living from the dead," Bear said quietly. "Not fancy rifles or store-bought clothes. It's knowing how to use what the land gives you. It's making what you need with your own hands." Finn understood. The bulletproof leather wasn't just protection. It was a symbol of self-reliance, a bridge between ancient native wisdom and frontier survival. It was proof that you could make yourself fit for this world or die trying. Today, in a world of Kevlar and advanced composites, leather armor seems primitive. But for the mountain men, it was life and death. It was technology born of their environment, testament to their connection with the natural world. And it reminds us that sometimes the most effective solutions emerge not from complexity, but from deep understanding of basic principles and willingness to work with what the earth provides. The mountain men are gone now, their trails faded, but their ingenuity and resourcefulness continued to inspire. In the story of their bulletproof leather, we find a timeless lesson. True protection comes not just from the strength of materials, but from the depth of knowledge and the resilience of spirit.